Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video we're going to look at 10 pro wrestlers who starred in horror movies. As a fan of horror movies and 1990s wrestling, I thought this would be a fun video to do, so let's get into it. So first up we have 12 Hour Shift, which was released in 2020 but takes place in 1999, which is actually prime time wrestling time. And this follows this nurse and an array of different characters who all get caught up in this kind of like heist of human organs. And it all gets a bit crazy. It interconnects amongst all the characters and gets a bit gruesome and out of control. And this one stars Mick Foley, who is probably most famous for playing Mankind in the World Wrestling Federation, the lovable yet insane Mankind character who would become a 3-time WWF champion. Now Mick Foley, I can't fault his acting or anything in this movie, but I gotta say I didn't really like his character in this. He plays like a really kind of nasty and unlikable, kind of like cartel gang leader that threatens this sort of nurse to get the organs that they want for trafficking these organs around. And it was a far cry from kind of the lovable Mick Foley character that we've become accustomed to over the years. So like I say, can't fault his acting or the way he came over in the film. I just didn't think it was a great character for Mick Foley to play in this movie. Now, as a bonus with this film, I'm not counting this as one of the 10 wrestlers, but this also stars David Arquette, who did have a brief run in WCW and actually won the WCW championship somehow, which I think makes 12 Hour Shift the only film to star both a WWF champion in Mick Foley and a WCW champion in David Arquette, which I thought was pretty cool. Next up we have Girl on the Third Floor from 2019, which stars wrestling superstar CM Punk. In this one, CM Punk is this guy, and him and his wife buy this big house to renovate up. And he keeps seeing this woman around the house that keeps catching his eye and sort of seducing him, but it all gets a bit dark and a bit horrifying. It's an okay movie. I think it originally came out on Netflix. There's not a lot goes on in it, but it does have a bit of okay atmosphere. CM Punk is pretty good in this. I know he was a popular wrestler. I never really liked him, to be honest, in wrestling. He was a bit after my time anyway, and he just wasn't my cup of tea. So I wasn't a huge fan of him in the ring anyway, but I can't fault him in this. His acting is pretty good. He gives a good performance. And it is quite an intriguing film, to say it is kind of a bit slow, but it has this cool, brooding sort of supernatural element going on to it while they're trying to renovate up this house. So yeah, a bit of a slow movie, not one of my favourite wrestlers, but a watchable film nonetheless. Next up we have Gremlins 2 from 1990, which features Hulk Hogan, who would have been one of the biggest personalities on the planet at that time. Regardless of that, he does only have a quick sort of cameo in this movie, but it's so fun and so memorable, I wanted to include it. And it's the bit where I think it's in the movie theatre and all the gremlins are causing chaos, and Hulk Hogan randomly stands up from his seat, gets up and turns to the camera and completely breaks the fourth wall and starts telling the gremlins that, you know, if they don't pack it in, Hulkamania's gonna run all over them and yeah, cause them lots of problems. And it's a really cool moment in the film. It kind of caught me off guard when I first watched it. I wasn't expecting that one bit, but every time I see it, it always makes me smile, and it always takes me back to that time period when wrestling was just huge and had really kind of got itself into the cultural mainstream, to the point where a wrestling star stood up and stopped the movie in order to deliver his wrestling-esque lines to the gremlins, which I just think is so cool and a really awesome crossover. So I definitely couldn't do this video without mentioning Hulk Hogan's brief but really awesome cameo in Gremlins 2. Next up we have Monster Brawl, which is not a film that I hear get mentioned hardly ever, but it was a really enjoyable film. I had a lot of fun with this one. Very kind of take your brain out level of entertainment, and it is literally they take around 8 famous monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula and all different kind of creatures, and they put them in a wrestling ring to fight and see who is the strongest monster. It's that basic of a plot, but I liked it. And this features an array of recognizable names and faces within the wrestling industry. Probably the most notable one for me though was Kevin Nash. So Big Daddy Cool Diesel, he's in this movie and he's pretty cool. I can't remember too much of what he is in this film because it's been so long since I've seen it. I think he plays like a corporal or something, this stern-laced corporal guy. But it was cool to see him in this movie. And I did always like Kevin Nash / Diesel in wrestling. He was never the most skilled wrestling technician, but he had a great look and he really conveyed that cool guy attitude really well, which has seemed to have run with him through his whole wrestling career and in kind of the few movies that I've seen him in. He has that same kind of aura about them, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, Kevin Nash played a pretty cool part in Monster Brawl, which is definitely worth checking out, especially if you like your horror and wrestling like I do. Next up we have Predator, the awesome Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which features Jesse the Body Ventura. Now Jesse Ventura, in terms of wrestling, a little bit before my time. I've seen some of his matches, pretty good in the ring. He's a pretty entertaining character, but I absolutely loved Jesse Ventura in Predator. When I first watched it as a kid, I was gutted when he got killed off because I thought he was one of the coolest guys in it. Has some great one-liners, really awesome macho guy, got the huge machine gun thing going on, and he's one of the characters that just really conveyed like that macho attitude of Predator. He's a really good part of the movie. He does pop up occasionally in wrestling every now and again, and yeah, he's still pretty awesome to see him come around. He's got a pretty cool voice whenever he's on the mic. So yeah, as I say, a bit before my time in terms of wrestling, but Jesse Ventura, one of my favourite characters in Predator for sure. Next up we have Rampage, which is an awesome like giant monster movie, almost like a Western kaiju film, if you would. And this stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the guy who, out of all wrestlers, has now kind of become a fully fledged actor. I think he started in like The Mummy Returns and The Scorpion King, and has just become one of the biggest names in Hollywood that there is today. So it's been a successful path for him. Gotta say, one of my favourite films he's ever done is Rampage, just because it's such a cool movie. I love the giant monsters in this. It's great to see The Rock mix it up with them all. It's got the giant sort of white ape creature, the giant wolf thing, which is awesome, and then the giant alligator thing, and they all kind of like fight at the end in the city, and it's totally awesome. I have a lot of fun watching this movie. It's very entertaining. In terms of wrestling, as successful as The Rock has been in acting, I still don't think he'll ever be as good as what he was in wrestling. He's absolutely incredible. One of the most entertaining guys in and out of the ring. Great on the mic. Always made you laugh out loud when he was like ripping into other wrestlers on the mic. And yeah, he was just a great part of the Attitude Era. Personally, I loved him as a heel in the late 90s in the Corporation. But yeah, any time The Rock was in wrestling, he made it great. So yeah, he'll always be more of a wrestler to me than an actor, but he is great in the movies that he's done, and Rampage is one of the most fun that he starred in. Okay, next up we have one of the stranger movies on the list. Strange movie and strange casting with this one. But this is Santa's Sleigh, which sees a killer Santa Claus going around killing people at Christmas. Great movie. It should be a Christmas staple in anyone's household. But it stars Bill Goldberg, one of the top stars of WCW, who I never would have imagined in this kind of role. Goldberg always struck me as quite a serious, sort of straight-faced competitor in the ring. I mean, he was one of WCW's biggest stars and an absolute beast. He had a huge unbeaten record and was kind of pushed as one of the top faces in the company. So to eventually see him play a killer Santa Claus movie in a rather silly Christmas horror film was a real kind of unexpected thing. But strangely, it does work. He's not bad in the movie either. He is pretty good as this big killer Santa Claus, and I have a lot of fun with the movie. So definitely worth checking out. Don't be put off by the fact that it's Goldberg and it's questionable that he can be entertaining in that kind of way. But yeah, this really is a fun film that you definitely should check out. Next up we have Scare Package, which is a pretty fun horror anthology, very sort of harking back to 80s kind of video store horror. So really cool in terms of the theme of this one. But there's one story where there's a killer going around. He's only in it briefly, but he was in it enough for me to recognise him. And it was Dustin Rhodes, who played one of the most intriguing wrestlers I ever thought in wrestling. And that was Goldust, who was a very kind of camp, cross-dressing, very effeminate wrestler, which in the mid-90s was unheard of, and a very brave character to have tried to have bring into the business. But I always really enjoyed Goldust in wrestling. He was very different, very entertaining, and good in the ring. And he managed to be quite, as I say, quite camp and effeminate, yet badass at the same time, which is a very hard thing to pull off. So I've always given Dustin Rhodes a lot of credit for doing that. Sadly, Goldust never kind of reached the heights of like The Rock or Stone Cold, anything like that. But I always remember him as being an intriguing character. So it's good to see him pop up in this. As I say, he's like a killer, doesn't say a lot, quite brooding as he goes around. But it was him, and he had a good screen presence, and it was just nice to see the guy who played Goldust, I don't know, get a bit of work and be in a movie and be in a cool film like Scare Package. So I did want to mention this one as one of the bit more obscure examples of a wrestler being in a horror film. Next up we have See No Evil, starring Glenn Jacobs, who played Kane, one of my favourite wrestlers of all time. An absolutely badass looking wrestler, a wrestler that really kind of brought in a lot of the horror elements of wrestling at the time, and had one of the greatest storylines ever, where he was introduced as The Undertaker's brother and had a long-term rivalry with him, which led up to a big match. So yeah, Kane was always an absolute favourite of mine. I was obsessed with him and his look when I was growing up. Loved his entrance. Everything about Kane was awesome. Unfortunately, I can't say I had the same affinity for See No Evil. I wasn't a fan of this movie, and I didn't think Glenn Jacobs really brought anything to the movie, if I'm honest. He didn't really have as much screen presence or any sort of level of menace that I was hoping he would have. It's just not a film on the whole that I'm a fan of. I didn't enjoy it, and I've not enjoyed it when I've returned to it. So unfortunately, See No Evil is not a movie that I'm a fan of, but Glenn Jacobs as Kane, one of the best wrestlers ever. And then last but certainly not least, we have John Carpenter's They Live, starring Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper as a wrestler was a little bit before my time. He was kind of going out the door as I was coming in to wrestling. Gotta say, he's not one of my favourite superstars. I know he's very popular. He was a huge star of the 80s, and a lot of people still look back very fondly on Roddy Piper. Just not one that I was all that crazy about. But in They Live, he is really, really cool. He plays a fantastic part in this. Plays the lead role as the guy who uncovers the subliminal alien invasion with the awesome special sunglasses and takes it to him with the help of Keith David. And yeah, it's one of the best things I've ever seen Roddy Piper do. When I think of Roddy Piper, I do think more of They Live than his wrestling career. And it's strange he didn't do more movies. He just pop up in a few other things, but I never seen him in anything sort of was like a leading role like They Live. So yeah, it's a shame he didn't do more movies. But as a wrestler, he was good a little bit before my time. But in They Live, he is absolutely excellent and one of the best things about the movie. So one of the best examples, I would say, of a wrestler being in a horror movie and doing a great job. So there you go, guys. That's 10 wrestlers who starred in horror movies. Let me know what you think about that, if you enjoyed the video and what you thought about these performances in horror movies. And let me know if there's any more horror movies starring wrestlers. Really interested to know what you come up with. So thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more videos.